10 children.
Gosh.
Huge family.
It's a lot of kids.
9 of the kids were home. The 10th was away in the Army. It's Christmas Eve. Mom and Dad have let some of the kids open some presents. Those kids say, hey, can we stay up late and play with some presents? And they say, well, yeah, that's fine as long as you lock up and shut everything down tonight before you go to bed.
Right. That's reasonable.
Great. Yeah, totally. It's Christmas Eve. Why not?
Yeah, man.
About midnight, the phone rings, and Mrs. Sauter gets up and answers it.
And somebody said, is your refrigerator running?
No. No, they asked for somebody that didn't live at the house, and so she, of course, said, no, you got the wrong number. The person said, oh, okay, and hung up.
Oh, that's creepy and mysterious.
And when she was done on the phone, she realized that the kids, being kids, hadn't done what they were supposed to. The lights were on, and the door was unlocked.
Weird.
And her one of her daughters, Marion, was asleep on the couch.
Yeah.
She goes, shuts everything down, locks it up, goes to bed. She says she remembers as she was in bed falling asleep again, she heard something hit the roof, or sounded like it hit the roof and rolled off.
Yeah.
And then she went to sleep.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I guess I'm not totally sure why the door would have been unlocked anyway. Like, why wouldn't she just say, okay, make sure to turn... It's not like the kids were playing outside with their toys. Just lock the door when you go up as a parent.
That's a good point. But these are back in old times. I used to live in a small town, and when I was a kid, and we didn't lock our door.
Yeah,
at
but
all. We would go away. Yeah, I mean, so.
I guess since she asked them to lock the door and then
why
locked it later,
why didn't she just lock
do it?
It might have been a key lock situation. I grew up in a house where the only way to lock the doors from inside or out was with a skeleton key. The house was so old, so you couldn't actually lock it from the inside without the key.
Yeah.
So it might not have been just so easy to shut the door and just flip the lock.
Yeah, that's fair.
Hard to say.
Maybe, yeah.
Around 1:30 in the morning, ballparkish.
And by the way, their bedroom, I believe, was on the ground floor of the house, right?
The parents' bedroom was on the ground floor.
And also
And
their office.
there was a entire story above them.
We don't know. I don't know that. We'll get into some of the spatial weirdness of this house.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because of the thing that we a little bit glossed over, that she heard something fall on the roof. Mm-hmm. So if she were a few stories down,
let me describe the house briefly. As best as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a lot of questions in this story, and one of them is, how is this house laid out?
Yeah,
I don't know because there's no photos, there's no drawings, but Mom and Dad, Mr. and Mrs. Sauter, their bedroom is on the ground floor.
And apparently they also had a home office there. Because
they had a home office in the house.
That was on the ground floor
also. That was also
I
on
believe.
the ground floor.
Yeah.
And then the children were upstairs. And what I don't know is if upstairs was a true second story.
Or a story and a half house.
Or a story and a half where it was just the attic.
Yeah.
And, that's where because all the kids slept upstairs in 2 rooms. Where the staircase is in the house, I don't know where anything in the house is related because we never get any description of the home.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly how she would have heard. If it is a true 2-story house, I'm not quite sure how she heard something hit and, I'm using air quotes here, roll down the roof.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well,
I can't answer that.
It could have been something big and loud enough that you would hear it throughout the house.
Could have been.
But you would think that people upstairs would have heard it.
Yeah.
You think that,
it also could have been a toy.
It could have been a lot. Yeah, it could have been something up in the second story or in the attic space. Yeah, I don't know.
Or a chunk of ice.
It is Christmas Eve.
Yeah, and it
is December.
It was freezing cold and icy, right?
It was.
Yeah.
It was, because we're in West Virginia. It's freaking cold there in the winter.
Well, and sometimes squirrels will land in your roof with a big thump and just sort of scamper off.
Not at midnight, though. Squirrels don't do that. Squirrels hibernate, Joe. Okay.
Do they? Okay.
Yes, but we're way off track.
Anyway.
Stop talking about squirrels. So about 1:30 in the morning, she wakes up, Miss Sauter wakes up again and realizes that there's smoke and the house is on fire. And as you briefly mentioned earlier, I think it was Joe actually talked about there was a home office, and she figured out that there was a fire and it was all the smoke was coming from the home office. Husband and wife wake up, scream at the kids to get out, and they run outside. Mm-hmm. Totally makes sense. Let's get out of a burning building.
In retrospect, maybe they should have gone upstairs and grabbed the kids.
Actually, I don't agree with that. Because here's the thing, is that the kids that were upstairs, I told you Marion was on the couch. She'd fallen asleep downstairs, and then Mom and Dad were downstairs. And the youngest, the 3-year-old child, was also on the ground floor. The others were upstairs, and the ones that were upstairs, there was John, he's 23, George Jr., 16. We have Marion, who was downstairs. She was 17. I'll just give everybody's ages here because it kind of is important because you see the range of the kids. Sylvia was the little one, the 3-year-old. She was the one that was sleeping downstairs as well. So the people who got out were John, George Jr., Marion, Sylvia, and then Mr. and Mrs. Sauter. They got out of the house. The rest of the children, we've got Maurice, who was 14, Martha 12, Louis 10, Jeannie 8, and Betty 6 didn't get out of the house. John, the oldest son, the 23-year-old, he said that he shook the other kids awake
they were
before he left.
Yeah, I think John and George were in a separate room, right? There were 5 kids in one room, and then John and George in the other room.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, though.
Yeah.
Again, no descriptions are really good of who was where in that upper story. I have read that it was 2 rooms, but I'm not really positive who was in what. But it does sound like the younger children were in the room together.
Yeah.
The 5 young ones that
Which
didn't
I
get
guess
out.
is weird because it would make more sense if you'd be all boys, all the boys in one room and all the girls in the other. You know?
Maybe.
Maybe. I don't know.
They may not have had that luxury.
Yeah, it sounds
Well,
Well,
like...
if you
tiny
have 2
space.
rooms. I don't-
It's a lot of boys to cram into one room, though.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
boys are terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, they were stacked like cordwood. In this
Yeah.
room, and,
So, terrible pun, Joe.
yeah.
Okay, so house is on fire. Several kids get out. 5 of them are not out. Mr. Sauter tries to get back into the house, but he can't because the fire is so intense. He runs to the rain barrel to get water to throw on the fire, but we already talked about it's Christmas
like
Eve.
1:30.
It's 1:30 in the morning. The bucket is the barrel is frozen solid.
Yeah.
Can't do anything there.
Well, that's kind of mysterious.
He runs to get his ladder from where he normally keeps it so he can get to the window where the kid's room is at. His ladder is missing. Runs to his truck to start one of his trucks because he's got a freight business. He hauls freight and he hauls coal. Trucks won't start, which is mysterious because his plan was to back up to the house and then get on the top of the truck.
Yeah, sabotage, obviously.
Yeah, sabotage, obviously. But yeah, they wouldn't start. Marion, to try and get the fire department, she runs to a neighbor's house, and this varies from the version you read, but she either couldn't get a hold of the operator, because this is back in the day when you didn't dial a number, you called the operator who then connected you. Either couldn't get a hold of the operator or did get a hold of the operator and was connected to the chief of the volunteer fire department. The other version is she couldn't get through. Somebody else saw the fire, tried to call the operator, also couldn't get through, and then that person drove to either the operator's house or the chief's house, not sure which, and rousted them.
It would seem like
that's all they had was a volunteer
fire department. That's all they had.
department?
yeah,
Okay.
it would seem like they probably drove to the chief's house. Why bother with the operator?
I don't know.
If you're already behind the wheel.
It's weird. I don't know. Here's something that everybody wigs out about is when the fire department showed up. 8 o'clock in the morning.
That does seem like a long time.
Yeah.
It does, unless you understand how the fire department worked. It's a volunteer fire department.
So they would just send out a group text, I assume?
Oh, of course. No.
Yeah.
They used what was called the phone tree system. So person 1 calls person 2 and says, hey, there's a fire. Get to the station. Okay, I will. Person 1 hangs up, goes to the station. Person 2 calls person 3. Hey, there's a fire. Get to the station. And the process repeats, and it's the tree to get a hold of everybody.
In my experience, it had always been more like we used phone trees when I was in elementary school.
It should be like 2 people.
It should be, you call 2 people. But
And then
yeah,
they call
same
2
thought.
people each.
Yeah.
That's probably more like what it was.
It probably was. I'm just keeping it as simple as possible here. Because it took me a while to remember what a phone tree was because it's such an old concept. to me.
You can't just send out a mass email.
No. No. God, you know what I don't miss is the mass text messages. Anyway, so people wig out about this, but that's the system they had. They didn't have a siren at the firehouse, so they couldn't just ring that and get everybody's attention. One of the things that you will see when you come across this story, and this is about the fire, is that it lasted for about 45 minutes. which is wrong.
And,
Really
It's
wrong.
absolutely wrong.
you know, a lot of house fires do only last that long, but that's when the fire department shows up and puts it out. The house can burn for days.
Yeah, 45 minutes to an hour is the length of time the house was on fire before the roof collapsed.
Yeah.
The roof collapsed. The house continued to burn.
Of course.
It was had to hose it down to get in. So
Yeah.
this is 6.5 hours of fire.
Yeah,
So
by
this
the
is one of
time,
those things that you read that is incorrect.
yeah, by the time they got there, it was probably just mostly smoldering ashes and sitting in the basement.
Well, I see that's the thing is I don't know that because if it is a 2-story house, and that's a good thing to bring up is the basement. But if it's a 2-story house, that's a lot of material and that's all your possessions. Joe talks about the basement, which is important here because the house had a basement. We don't know how big. I'm guessing it's about a 5 feet to 8 feet deep basement, a normal size basement.
Yeah.
But we don't know that. But there's a reason I say that, and it'll come up
Sure.
shortly.
5 feet wouldn't be like a normal size.
No, but this is the 40s, and you just dug a basement. There wasn't a standard for how deep.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
it would
and-
be like a crawl space.
A
more than
large crawl space.
Yeah.
Yes.
You couldn't stand up.
I mean, 5 feet deep. If you have a 5-foot deep basement, that's
That could be
5
below
feet
grade.
below grade, and then you got like a foot, maybe a couple of feet above grade.
Yeah,
That's
certainly.
about standard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know.
that could absolutely be it. Well, obviously everything that was on fire fell into the basement, and everything was contained, and it would have kept burning. So that's where all that fire is, and that's where they would have had to put everything out. Something I came across and I hadn't really thought about, and you never really see listed in this story, is that homes in that area at that time were heated with coal.
Yeah.
Which
course.
means that there's a coal chute, which means there's piles of coal sitting in the basement to
Yeah.
heat the home with.
Oh, hell yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
when house catch on fire, it's going to also catch all that coal on fire.
And didn't Mr.
Yeah.
Sauter run a coal business?
Yeah, he hauled coal.
he hauled
Hauled
coal.
so
Well,
So that's another bit
Yeah.
to say, well, they probably heated with
Yeah.
coal.
Oh no! I mean, they were living in coal country, West
Yeah,
Virginia. And
yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
My house is 90 years old. Originally, it had a coal burning furnace in it, and
Yeah.
we're not even living in coal country here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So yeah, I'm sure they had a coal furnace.
So here's something that I want to bring up about that is if people don't realize is that coal can burn extremely hot.
Oh, hell
1,000
yeah.
to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the conditions, type of coal, how much airflow. There's a lot of things that it can influence that temperature.
Yeah.
But it's going to burn easily 1,000 degrees. So
Oh, yeah.
that's pretty damn hot. Keep that in mind. Now, we get back to the fire department. They arrive, they hose the place down, they start combing through the scene. It's a bunch of volunteer firefighters.
Yeah.
They don't know how to look for bodies, and let's be honest, at this point, everybody's expecting to find skeletal remains because it's been hours and hours and hours that the house is on fire. They don't
Yeah.
expect to probably find full intact bodies, but full intact skeletons, yes. They don't know what they're doing, and they're combing through. In their search, which according to the lore was only about 2 hours long, they identified the source of the fire, which was a faulty fuse box, and B, they found no remains.
Yeah.
They then, after 2 hours, because it was Christmas morning, told Mr. Sauter, listen, we're going to go home and we're going to come back and we will finish the search. Just give us some time.
Yeah, because the fact of the matter is like, what's the point of spoiling your Christmas when there's 5 dead bodies in it? They're not going to go anywhere.
Sadly,
Yeah.
brutally,
Sadly.
that's the truth.
Yeah, it is.
That really is.
Yeah.
That's a harsh way to put it, but it's absolutely right.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. That's also not correct in terms of the report that they found nothing. Oh, there's reports that they did find things. The volunteer firefighters, along with a priest who was there, and Mrs. Sauter's brother, one of her brothers, all said that they saw remains in the basement. So
They saw pieces of bone.
they
that
saw
kind of thing.
pieces of bone.
And we're
things.
talking like in the basement, as in the house has collapsed into the basement, not.
Correct.
Okay, I just
Correct.
want to clarify
Yes,
that.
everything burns. Everything's burned and fallen in, and
Yeah.
it's a hole in the ground that's holding all of that
the
burned stuff.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to clarify because when I first was reading through this and I was seeing the term in the basement, I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. Why would they be in the basement?
No,
yeah.
it all
Got it.
fell
So
into
it
the
all
basement.
okay.
Yep. So, the thing is, though, they didn't tell Mr. and Mrs. Sauter what they had seen.
Yeah.
Okay, they still have to finish with their search, but they don't say anything because, again, it's Christmas morning and
Yeah,
you
you don't
just lost
necessarily-
5 children. You don't say, hey, well, I saw a couple of bones in there, just so you know, but hey, like, we'll
Your
totally
kids
be back.
definitely died.
Yeah, they're totally barbecued, man. Sorry.
Yeah,
That's just a terrible thing to say, and that's not what they were going to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Which I get.
Yeah, you want to say Merry Christmas more. You want to, like, buck them up. Yeah.
Which I don't know how you would in this situation.
Yeah,
but
no, not really.
So they saw remains like of what?
I don't know.
I asked.
I
It
don't know.
wasn't, I mean, was it? We don't know. Bones.
It's got to be skeletal remains.
Right.
After that much time, there would be very little flesh left.
I saw some claims that they found some internal organs. Which
Oh, that's later on.
Yeah, which I find hard to believe because after all that time and those really high temperatures, you would think all that stuff would be just charred ashes.
One of the last bits of the human body, aside from bones, flesh, just the flesh that's left over in a fire, believe it or not, is your intestines. Because they're so dense and full of moisture and waste, so they don't burn as fast as everything else.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But those would be one of the few things that would be left before then it's just bone.
And charred bone.
Charred bone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Blends in with the rest of the charred stuff.
Yeah,
Yes.
charred brittle bones.
Yes. Okay. That is absolutely true. Mr. Sauter, being a grieving father, several days later, decides against the advice of everybody because, by the way, the volunteer fire department hadn't had a chance to come back yet. It's the holidays.
Yeah.
They got things to do, I guess. They don't come back yet. He decides that he's going to make what remains of the house a memorial to his children, and he fills in the basement with dirt.
What?
Yeah.
5 vertical feet of dirt
Yeah. Well, yeah, probably.
with a bulldozer.
Yeah.
And packs it in there, and then they plant flowers on top. Now, I get planting flowers on top. That is totally a memorial thing to get. The bulldozing bit is weird to me, but one of the things that I never find when you read about the fact that he filled in and out the basement first. We don't know. Did somebody come along and pull out all the stuff? Did he just say to hell with it and bury it all?
I think
Don't
that.
know.
Yeah, I kind of get the feeling that they left all the stuff in there and he pushed the dirt in on top.
Yeah.
Because he was sure at that point that his kids' remains were still in there. He just
I
that's
feel
their
the
grave, and I'm going to fill it in.
I absolutely feel the same way, but we don't have anything that says one way or the
absolutely
other.
know. Yeah.
And however horrible this is there a theory that he was trying to cover something up?
No, actually, that's never in any of the theories.
Okay.
It's never that mom and dad are directly responsible.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
Never that.
I don't think that if he had actually, say, murdered his kids and was trying to cover it up, I don't think he would have called so much attention to the case.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
everybody.
they kept this case alive.
Oh, they
Yeah,
really
for
did.
sure. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't going to come up. So
Okay.
everybody believes that this was just the really ill-fated actions of a grieving father.
Yes.
Okay.
The filling in, yes.
Yeah.
As a lot of grieving parents will do, of course, Mr. and Mrs. Sauter try to go on with their lives, but eventually, because they don't get all the details of the case, they start to disbelieve what they're told to the point that they don't believe that their children were actually in the fire.
Which I guess is weird.
It's kind of a
He
normal
seems to have
thing.
like accepted it in the beginning.
He did, but there's a lot of parents who a child commits suicide,
Yeah.
and they believe at first that it was suicide, and then suddenly, 2 years later, they staunchly believe that their child was murdered, and that it's
Yeah.
a cover-up of some kind,
Yeah.
or some kind of diabolical scheme.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to believe that.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's something you would rather believe.
Oh, yeah,
People
totally.
are very good at believing what they want to believe.
They are, and,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what happened. I think the thing that really planted the seed for Mr. Sauter was, not too long after, he sees a picture in the newspaper of a girl who he's pretty sure is one of his children, and he goes to try and see her. She's in New York, by the way. They're in West Virginia. No shocker, the child's parents tell him to buzz off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Get away from us, crazy man. But he's sure at that point that his kids didn't actually die, and they continue to follow that. They eventually get the case into the destruction of their home and potential murder or theft, abduction.
Kidnapping, yeah.
Kidnapping, thank
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
of their children reopened. It was reopened. It was reinvestigated. Nothing ever comes of it. Eventually, the site of the home was excavated. It was in 1949. There's a pathologist by the name of Oscar Hunter. He excavated the site. By his own admission, though, he didn't do what's called screening. And if you don't know what that is, it's literally running the dirt